bizarre coincidence by a show of hands? That's quite a lot of you. See, they're very common. They're a lot more common than most people think. I'd like to start by telling you about a coincidence that happened to me recently. So I finished university in July of this year, and I enrolled on a journalism internship in Berlin. Now, in Berlin, I was living in East Berlin, which is the old Soviet area, living in an old Soviet tower block. And every day I was required to commute via tram into the centre of Berlin where I was working. Now, on the day in question, I overslept quite dramatically because I'd been drinking the night before. And I decided to not go to work at all and just go exploring. So I went down to the usual tram stop, and instead of getting on the M8 tram, I got on the M13 tram. And I just started listening to music and stayed on the tram for an amount of time I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you where I got off, but it must have been miles away from where I lived. It was a sort of trendy Berlin neighbourhood, a lot of artisan coffee shops and art galleries. I wandered around for about an hour. Eventually I walked into a cafe, and there was the main cafe, and out the back there was a courtyard. And I walked straight through and into the courtyard, and there was one person out there, and it was a close friend from university who I'd lived with for 3 years. And he didn't know I was in Berlin, and I didn't know he was in Berlin, and it was just a complete coincidence. And so the next morning I was nursing a second hangover. As I lay there, I just started turning over in my mind how bizarre that really is. All the different variables on my side and on his side that led to us meeting in that moment in Berlin. How strange that is. So I started to do some research into coincidences themselves. And I came across a book by a mathematician called David Hand called The Improbability Principle. And in that book, his main thesis is that extremely improbable events are actually incredibly common. And that's logically very sound when you think about billions of people on Earth all going about their lives, very, very strange things, and things that on paper seem almost impossible, happening constantly. The difference is when it happens to you, you feel like there's some kind of secret that you're not being let into, like there's some kind of glitch in the matrix has happened. But in reality, it's just extremely improbable. And this is because there's a sort of innate human desire to assign meaning to random events, it seems. And you don't need to experience a coincidence or something truly bizarre to feel that. Even the example of, say, you're in a casino and you're playing roulette. If the wheel is spun, say, 10 times, and every time it's landed on red, most people would be inclined to then bet on black. But that is actually, it's nonsensical. There's no reason to bet on one more than the other, because the wheel has no memory, and it's also colourblind. So it's just this desire to detect a pattern when in reality there is none. It's the same if you spun the wheel 1 million times and it had been red every single time. The next time the chance is still 50-50. But it's also not how our brains want to think. So where does this really leave us then? Although I've just laid out the argument that these sorts of coincidences are completely random and there is no innate logic to it, this might not be the full picture. There's a writer named Simon Van Boy who says that coincidences, when you experience a coincidence in life, it means that you're on the right path. Now, of course, our day-to-day lives aren't actually quite as random as a spinning roulette wheel. I don't know about you, but I've experienced this in life, that when I've started to take risks and focus on things and put myself out there, whatever it might be, whether it's starting a new skill or something, you find that it's almost like reality kind of helps you along the way with certain little nudges here and there. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing. It's almost like coincidences come to your assistance when you allow them to. So if you keep with the roulette wheel metaphor, for example, every time you spin that roulette wheel, in life you can spin it. And although you can't necessarily decide what the ball is going to land on in terms of the colour, you can decide whether to spin roulette wheels or not, or indeed whether to bet on them. So it's worth taking chances. So the moral is, take chances, get drunk, miss work, go on